Hello and welcome back to EC Angling. In this episode we're going to take a look at the Ronnie or spinner rig. It's a really effective rig for fishing a pop-up or any bait that has a good deal of buoyancy. So you could say drill out a tiger nut, put some foam or cork inside, and that would work as well. Basically the key thing to remember is it works best with something that's going to lift the hook off the bottom. It's a great way of presenting, as I said, a bait with flotation and keeping it nicely close to the bottom as well. So if you want to fish something just over some silt or there's a little bit of debris on the bottom, this is a great way to get around that. So without any further ado, we're going to zoom in and take a look at this really effective rig. Okay, so here we have the components that I like to use to make a Ronnie rig. In this case, I've got a size 4 Gardner Mugga hook. It is good for a wide range of size of baits in my opinion. Because you're using a pop-up, it will kind of negate the weight of the hook, so you can get away with a pretty large hook, which I think helps kind of increase the effectiveness of your hookups. So that's the hook I'm going to be using in this. I'll use that for both a 14 and an 18 millimeter pop-up. I can, for the 18 millimeter, go up a size even and go to a size 2. But a 14 will float this hook really nicely. I have a little bait screw here with the flexi ring on it. There's a bunch of these on the market. I will sometimes just use a little rig swivel with the flexi ring instead of the screw, just because you can tie the bait on and it makes it a lot more secure. However, where I'm fishing right now, during the winter, there's no turtles around, so I'm okay with just going with the bait screw, as I can change baits a lot easier and quicker. Now, to secure this little, see here, C-lock swivel with the ring, you can use either shrink tube, small piece of shrink tube, or this silicone sleeve here. The sleeve allows you to actually change hooks on the hook length, and you know, it can be quite nice to be able to do that. However, it is kind of bulky, especially compared to the shrink tube, so it's just kind of decide what you want to do. Today I'm going to go with the shrink tube just because I find it to be a little bit more secure, and it is a smaller package when it's shrunk on that C-lock swivel. One drawback about it is that once it gets beat up by catching fish or whatnot, you really have to cut it off and put on a new piece. You can't just swap it out. So if you want to change hooks, you got to cut it off and reshrink a new piece on. So we got a little shank stop bead, hook bead there, just to keep the rig swivel with the screw on there from coming back off the hook. On the other end, I'll be putting this anti-tangle sleeve here, and I put that on the hook link before I go ahead and tie the loop on the other end, which I'll be doing. Got a little bit of the Gardner tungsten putty. It's one of the better putties, honestly, and that's just to counterweight the pop-up should it need it. With a 14 millimeter Munch Baits pop-up, I've found that I typically don't really need putty. Between the weight of the swivel, the hook, the bait screw, and everything else, it tends to sit really nicely, just real lightly on the bottom without any additional weight. But if you go up a size, or maybe if you're using a different brand or something, you may need the putty, so that's something to keep in mind. And then using, for the boom section, 20-pound, zoomed in way too much here, 20-pound fluorocarbon. Your choice of brands. Gardner makes a nice one, but most of them seem to work pretty well, and that will allow this rig to kick out nicely, and also provide a good deal of protection from snags and whatnot, which I'm also fishing around in the winter, as the fish in my area tend to like snags in the winter especially. And also it's really invisible underwater, especially when you're down 10, 11, 12 feet and the water's not terribly clear. They're really not going to be able to see that. So with that, I'm going to zoom out a little bit since this window is very tiny and give you an overview of how I assemble this rig. To assemble the rig, basically I create the Ronnie swivel, spinner, whatever, end piece first with the hook and all these components, and then I'll tie it with a uni knot or gritter knot if you prefer onto the swivel and put on the anti-tangle boom afterwards. So, going to remove the old piece of line that is attached to this C-lock swivel, because obviously I'd used it before, but it's still good. And then what I'm going to do is cut maybe a, I don't know, 1/4 inch, centimeter, something like that, piece of shrink tube. It doesn't have to be terribly long. Going to slide that onto the shank of my hook. Going to take my C-lock swivel. You can use the spinner swivels or other swivels as well, but this one is, I find, a little bit easier to put on, and if the wire of your hook is a little bit thicker, it'll go right over it. So we're going to put that on. I go back to front. I honestly don't know if it makes a difference. Then we're going to slide that shrink tube down so that it is covering both the eye of the hook and the C on the swivel. Let's see if I can get this up closer, if it'll focus. So that's what it's going to look like. So I'm going to do that. And since all of my lighters seem to have run out of butane at the same time, we're going to use a match. And basically, we're just going to shrink that shrink tubing down real gently. Like so. Nice thing about this is if you are on the bank and you don't have some way to steam it or shrink that tubing, you're not coming in contact with the hook link material at all with this, so you can use just an open flame without any issues. So there we have that. Next, we slide on the hook swivel with the bait screw on there. Next is the little hook bead. Now this can be kind of fiddly. The idea is to go through, there's generally a little bore right at the middle of that, and you got to kind of get the hook point going through there. I don't know if we can do this so you can see. Kind of use your fingernail to push it through and try and get the hook point to come out the very middle. Follow that little bore hole through the middle. And then I generally push it back until it's not quite as far as the barb on the hook. So it's going to sit something like that. You can play around with it, but generally speaking, try and keep it towards this end of the hook. So, that is literally it for assembling that rig. That is about as simple as you can get. You know, it looks complex, but it takes almost no time at all. Now I'm going to cut probably a 12-inch or so section of 20-pound fluorocarbon. I'm going to tie that on to the large eye on that flexi ring C-lock swivel. And I'll use 4 or 5 turns, something like that. We'll see what we come up with, what feels right. 1, 2, 3, probably going to go with 4. That should be enough. My main line is considerably less breaking strain than this, so it's not like I need to really worry about the full strength here. I'm going to wet it, because fluorocarbon is a bit tricky. Now the way I do this, I put my finger in here, grab both the tag end and the hook link, and kind of shrink this down so that it tightens up here, and that way when I grab it and slide it gently down, it doesn't crimp up the hook link too bad. If you tighten it up right down here, sometimes you can get a lot of crinkling on there, and I don't like that personally. So there you have it. I'm going to trim that off. Leave a little bit of a tag there, millimeter or so. And then take our anti-tangle sleeve and slide it from the thin side through. That way when we put it in the rig box, it'll sit all ready to go. All I got to do is slide this down. Now, measure off, approximately 7 inches or so and tie a loop there. I find that if I make it too short, the fish don't really seem to be able to suck it in all that well. And you can make it longer sometimes. It'll work better. Really depends. Don't be afraid to change and play with those lengths. Some days the fish are going to be more aggressive and a shorter hook length will work better. Other days a longer hook length seems to do the job. So just kind of play with that. And go for probably about 7 inches, as I said. I'm going to tie a perfection loop. Or try to. There we go. Again, I'm going to wet it before I cinch it down. Tighten that down nice and snug, and the line broke. So, another thing we're going to talk about right now, since that broke. That is a perfectly good knot, and I didn't tie it wrong. However, I have found, and I haven't really heard about anyone talking about this, that some lines prefer some knots. I don't know why this is, but certain lines will just do better with different types of knots. So, obviously this particular line, which is just probably the cheapest fluorocarbon I could buy, didn't like that perfection loop. So, we're going to try a different knot. Go ahead and remove this. And always test your knots. Don't be afraid. If it breaks, it's much better that it breaks while you're tying the rig than when you hook a fish. So, do it over again. Cut another 12-inch section. Straighten that out. Tie a uni knot. Now I really should just stick with the Gardner fluorocarbon. It is better, but I didn't have any 20-pound right now. So, for the purposes of this video, I'm using this cheap fluorocarbon, so its knot strength maybe isn't so good. It's going to be fussier about knots. Doesn't like perfection loops, obviously. Go ahead and wet that. Snug that up a little bit. Slide it down. Make sure that it is nice and snug. Trim it off. Slide the anti-tangle sleeve on from the thin end, which is kind of hard to see. The lighting in this garage is not the best. There we go. Okay, measure off approximately how long I want it to be. Now we're going to go for a figure 8 loop this time and see if it likes that better. Here's our figure 8. I'm going to wet it. Snug it down gently, making sure to provide equal tension. If I wasn't doing it this way for the camera, I'd probably grab this tag end with my teeth and pull it. So I'll snug it down that way. Pull on that. I'm going to use my teeth anyways. And it does give another millimeter or so. Alright, trim this. And we'll test it again. If it breaks, well then I'm just going to use some other sort of hook link. So there we have it. It seems to like that knot better. Lots of other lines do just fine with that perfection loop, and I've used it for many years and never had an issue, but you always want to test your knots. Even if it's a knot that you have good confidence in, but if it's a line you're not all that familiar with, test them, because it may or may not be the right knot for that line. Now, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of putty. Probably won't need it if I'm going with 14, but I have been having good luck with 18mm pop-ups lately, so I'm going to put a little bit of putty on there should I go for the 18. And the way I do that is I roll that putty to a little cylinder, stick it through that big flexi ring swivel ring, like that, bend it back and smash it down over the knot and give it a little bit of a roll between my fingers. That really doesn't come off for the most part and still provides plenty of movement for your rig. So there you have it, the Ronnie or spinner rig. It's extremely simple to tie, really. You can buy pre-tied ones, but I'm not quite sure why you would, simply because they are so easy to tie. I'm going to go grab a pop-up and I'll kind of show you what it would look like underwater. I don't have a test tank here, but it certainly is easy to just demonstrate without it, and also show you kind of how it flips on the palm test. Okay, so I'm going to go with a 14mm cream seed, washed out pop-up. I love cream seed in the winter. Can't always get away with using any sort of pop-ups during the warmer months here in Texas because of the turtles especially, and the catfish get even more active. But this time of year, it's certainly pretty much my favorite bait, and it works just phenomenally well. It would probably work in the other seasons as well if the turtles weren't so active. So I'll take one of those. And little bait screws, all different types. This one is got a little flexi ring swivel embedded into a plastic. Push that in. And these pop-ups are just the right consistency for doing it with this. They won't come off during a cast or anything like that. And there you have it. That's the finished rig. Now, on the palm, because of the swivel here, it turns really quickly. You can see immediately it digs in. We'll even try the other side here. And just instantly, it's going to catch and grab hold to anything it touches. So it's kind of like a 360 rig in many ways, but I found it to actually turn a little bit better. But even if it's pointing completely the wrong way, when a fish sucks it in, it's going to immediately be caught. So, great little rig there. Sits up nicely. You can move that hook bead. See the hook bead, and when I've been messing with it, it's slipped down towards the point a little bit too much, so I'm going to slide it back a little bit, give it a little bit more aggressive angle. There you have it. It's going to sit just like that on the bottom, above any sort of debris that's down there, and just kind of waft gently around, which is perfect for the fish that I'm fishing for, because I believe a little bit of movement certainly helps to get their attention when they're out foraging. They tend to be foraging in this kind of large area, and they're just kind of drifting around, picking off morsels here and there, and a little bit of movement certainly doesn't hurt. So there is the Ronnie rig the way I tie it, or the spinner rig the way I tie it. Great little rig, super effective, super easy to tie, doesn't even require a knotless knot, just a simple loop knot. Of course, you got to choose the right one, and just a uni or grinner knot, and you're good to go. So, hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's one of the Ronnie or spinner rig is one of my favorite rigs for fishing single hook baits, and I've caught some really decent fish on it. I just caught this fish over the weekend, so it is an effective rig, and I really enjoy fishing it when I'm fishing a single hook bait. But I've also found it to be effective inside a PVA bag as well, because that pop-up will just sit right over the top of that little pile of bait. In my case, I mostly catch catfish with it, but it's a very nice presentation if you happen to be in an area that isn't plagued by catfish. So again, thank you for watching, and come back next time for a further installment. We'll find out what I'm going to do, probably when I sit down to do it. And please like and subscribe. It will really help me produce more videos. My goal right now is to get to 1,000 subscribers. So if I could do that, I will be really pleased this year. So please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Good angling.